Why is it that in the Old Testament there's no mentioning of a son?
Who told you there's no mentioning? You want me to give you a mention? I can give it to you.
All right, let's see it.
Proverbs chapter 30, verses 3 and 4. I neither learn wisdom, nor have knowledge of the Kadoshim. Kadoshim is plural of Kadosh, holy ones. Now watch this. Who has ascended?
Who has gone up to heaven and come down?
Yes.
Whose hands have gathered up the wind?
Go ahead.
Who has wrapped up the waters in a cloak?
Keep going.
Who has established all the ends of the earth? What is his name? And what is the name of his son?
Bam!
So the rhetorical gist of this video seems to be that these are rhetorical questions that have God as the unstated answer to them. And therefore, the final question, what is the name of his son, must be a reference to the Messiah as the Son of God, therefore a reference to Jesus in the Hebrew Bible. And there are two big problems with this interpretation of this passage. The first is that God is not the most likely unstated answer to these rhetorical questions. The most likely unstated answer is nobody, because these questions don't seem to be about who in all the universe could possibly have done this. The questions seem to be, what human could have done this? And the answer is no human could have done this. Nobody could have done this. And the first question gives this away when it says, who has ascended up to heaven and then come back down, which treats the earth as the default location of whoever is in view with these rhetorical questions, which means a human seems to be in view with these rhetorical questions. And the answer, what human can do all these things? Well, no human can do all these things. It's very similar to the rhetorical questions that we see asked of Job toward the end of the book of Job. This is about humans, and we can see this in, for instance, Clifford's 1999 Old Testament Library Commentary on Proverbs, or Fox's Anchor Bible Commentary on Proverbs, where they say that this is the most likely interpretation. And that brings up the second question. Even if we do accept that these rhetorical questions have God as their unstated answer, which is what some scholars do conclude, it's not clear that his son is a reference to the Messiah as the Son of God, because we have to consider, what would the author have thought? What would the audiences have thought? Messiah as Son of God was not an option in that time period. That was not in circulation yet. But there are two other answers that were in circulation and would have been much closer at hand and would have been what the author and the audiences first reached for if they understood this as a reference to the Son of God. The first comes from Exodus 4:22. Israel is my firstborn son. And we see this repeated in a handful of different places in the Hebrew Bible. The other has to do with Psalms 2:7. You are my son, this day I have begotten you. That is later reread as a reference to Jesus as the Messiah, but when it was originally written, it was a reference to the Davidic king, who was considered the anointed. So those two answers would have been arrived at before anyone ever would have thought of some future Messiah who is the anointed one and the Savior, who is going to be called Jesus of Nazareth. That answer just would not have been possible for the author or for any of the original audiences of Proverbs 30. So the notion that Proverbs 30 is a reference to Jesus of Nazareth, or to a future Messiah as Son of God, is just nonsensical. And if you'd like more discussion about the Son of God in Greco-Roman period Judaism and how this developed, Collins and Collins, King and Messiah as Son of God, is a wonderful discussion.